welcome back to another episode of the One Tree Hill Rewatch here on the Filmaholic channel. We are now on season 4 of One Tree Hill. I can't believe we're moving through this so quickly. But yeah, this is a big season because it's the last season of the high school year, the last season of the One Tree Hill that we know and love so far before they do the time jump and everything changes. But it's also the first season on the CW. Yes, the end of last season, the WB merged with the UPN and created the CW. So now we are on season 4 now, which is the first season on the CW. And a lot of things, it still feels like the same show, but it feels a little bit differently. And a couple of reasons. One, it's a different network. So you have that slight difference there. But also, it's a new cinematographer. A new cinematographer came in. Billy Dixon only did the first 3 seasons as cinematographer. And we got a new one here for season 4. So, like I said, it still feels like the same show, but it looks slightly different. If you look at the seasons, it looks slightly different. And I'm not really sure, I need to do some research on this, whether or not they filmed on digital and film and like when they did that difference, when they did that change. A lot of episodes in season 4, and I know it's a little bit newer too, they feel more crisp, they feel more clean, the shots and everything. I was watching an episode last night and I was just looking at the characters and everything and how they honestly, like Paul Johansson, in some of the shots look younger in this season than they did in the earlier seasons. So a little bit of different feel there. The episode opens with Lucas doing a voiceover, and this works in the context of the show because he wants to be a writer. And when he found that out at the end of season 3, when he was talking to Karen about how he wanted to go to UNC, study literature, that he wants to be a writer. And it makes sense for his character because he's always been reading and doing quotes and everything. So it makes sense for his character. But in this episode is when he starts writing his novel, which he goes on to have published, and it becomes a big thing for him. But so he starts writing this in this episode, and I think it was a good decision because, one, it's not only the first episode of a new season, so you're trying to get in new people that may start watching the series this season, but it's also a new network, so you're still trying to get a much bigger audience, So him writing this novel, he's talking about his life. Dan, Nathan, Haley, he's all telling us what had happened pretty much in the show leading up to this point, and setting everything up, or setting up scenes that further tell us what's happened, like even with Dan killing Keith and the flashbacks and everything, that set it up in a good way, I think. Which, one little thing I have a problem with there is it shows a flash. He's talking about Dan, which they show this really cool picture of Dan on the wall, of him being mayor. I thought that was a nice little touch. And then it cuts to Dan in the beach house trying to scrub off the murderer that's written on the wall. So he has the flashback then, and it shows you, whoever might be tuning in as a new audience member, what Dan has done as far as killing Keith. The reason I don't like this, because if you're a new viewer and you hadn't watched season 1 through 3, and this is the first time that you've watched the show, you get in this scene, it shows him killing Keith, but it has dialogue from other scenes, and that's not what he felt or said at the moment about Keith, and I didn't really like that, but they have that in the episode. They also, this is the season where I believe they switched Dan's beach house, the filming location. Now, this isn't a big issue for me. It's not a big issue for me, but you can slightly tell it. So, like in the earlier seasons when they filmed Dan's beach house, it was filmed at Carolina Beach, and like on the beach. And it's still supposed to be the same beach house. It's still supposed to be on the beach. But in this season, and the seasons moving forward, like there's one shot in this episode where you can see off to the side. It's at marshlands. It's like on the sound side of the ocean, which is I think over near Wrightsville Beach is where they actually filmed this house. So it's a little bit different than vibe, and this seems just like a bigger house in general. I actually like this location better for his house, the outside shots, but I'm not really sure the whole reasoning behind switching it. But they switched that. Also, another thing to add in was the hospital set. Okay, so the first 3 seasons they're in the hospital a lot, and they get to season 4 and they're back in the hospital. And I guess at this point they were like, let's just build a hospital set because we're using this all the time. We know we're going to use this several more times throughout this season and in future seasons. We need to just go ahead and build a hospital set and stop. Because in the past they kept going to the airport and filming hospital scenes, or building single hospital rooms, like on set or whatever they were doing. So they decided this point forward to build a hospital set. And you can tell from the shots in this episode, it's not like similar to what we've seen before, and moving forward it's the same set. And the story behind that is they didn't build this hospital set at Screen Gems, actually. Like the hospital scenes and the newsroom scenes, which we'll see later in season 5 and more, was actually filmed at a different location, not Screen Gems. It was actually filmed at a factory in Wilmington that I guess they rented out space and built these sets. Actually, I found that a little bit crazy, but they did, because I remember I went to watch filming, or wasn't much watching. It was much standing outside and waiting with other people until we saw an actor. But that was when Lee Norris was filming a scene for the newsroom in season 7. But that was filmed at Corning in Wilmington, actually. So that's a change in this season. You have the whole crash. It picks up with after the crash. The fact that Nathan had saved Cooper and Rachel. Lucas comes up, pulls Cooper to shore, and goes into this little storyline of Nathan being confused and going through stuff because he doesn't feel like he was the one that saved them. He thinks he saw Keith, and we'll get into that, and be confused by it. We also have the Dan, Deb, and Karen stuff in this episode. Dan obviously found out that Deb was the one that tried to kill him, so he chokes her out almost in the hospital, which is not cool, but also, like, you just found out she tried to kill you, and also you killed your brother because of her, essentially. Not because of her. I'm not trying to put the blame on her completely, but motivation-wise, in his mind, understand what I'm saying. So that scene was definitely realistic. You have that stuff, and you set up this thing, which they could have done a war between them in this season, essentially, but they didn't do that because that's not what is in Dan's mind. Essentially, after this episode, he has other things he's dealing with, but she doesn't. She actually, it affects her enough that she starts carrying that gun, but she also goes back to like taking pills, and I think it's a little bit weird that, not weird, but there's a lot of other stuff going on in her life that I don't know why all of a sudden, as soon as like that happened where he threatened her, she decided to go back to her pill addiction. But she does, and that becomes a big storyline for Deb throughout this whole season, in season 4, her struggling with her addiction. And maybe they went back to it because they didn't cover it as much as they could have in season 2 when they did it. But they followed through with that in this season. And then Dan starts building up his relationship with Karen in this episode that's going to carry us through this season as well. Him trying to reconnect with her and be there for her and the baby. Continues the Brooke and Rachel friendship in this episode too. Brooke moves in with Rachel. She moves into the house because Rachel's still in the hospital in this episode. But she moves into the house because she doesn't have a place to live now because she's moved out of Peyton's. And Rachel is still in the hospital, like I said, so is Cooper. There's a cop there that thinks that Rachel probably caused the accident, which she did. Haley saw that too, but and we know that Rachel told Cooper that she was pregnant. This happens in this episode, but then turns out she's not pregnant. She lied to Cooper, and we don't find out in this episode who is actually pregnant. It's still built on that. A lot of people at the time thought it was Brooke, and in the show they make you believe it's Brooke until later, episode 4, which we'll get to later. Peyton finds out she has a brother in this episode. She finds it in a note left on a Led Zeppelin album from Ellie, This is not Ellie's child. It's actually Peyton's biological father had a kid with another woman, and that's the brother, which is a big part of this season as well. That whole, not just the brother aspect, but Psycho Derek that comes in, which I'm not really sure how I feel about that storyline in general, rewatching it, but they bring that in. I do like how they set that storyline up in season 2, the Watch Me and Watch You, Psycho Derek. The season 2 finale, when Ellie first comes in, the show, they bring that Watch Me Watch You storyline in there, and I'm glad they did bring that back and follow through with it, but I don't really know if we needed a whole season dedicated to it, which we ended up getting. Overall though, this was a good season opener. I'm not sure if I mentioned already, but it was aired September 27th, 2006. It was directed by Greg Prange, who does, like I said, most of the big episodes, and it was written by Mark Schwann. It was a solid opener. We're moving on then to 402, Things I Forgot at Birth. It's the second episode of season 4, and it's also Brooke's birthday. It aired October 4th, 2006, and the season 3 finale, and now even this episode here, is all supposed to be based at the beginning of March. I think March 4th is Brooke's birthday. Brooke's actual character's birthday. This episode was directed by Greg Prange and written by Mark Schwann. I think it's a little bit surprising, not that Mark wrote this episode because he wrote a lot and everything, but that Greg directed both the season opener and the next episode that followed. I'm a little surprised by that, and I wonder. I guess it is maybe, I don't know. I'm surprised that they did that. I think I would have chose a different episode to direct other than just the first 2 back to back there. But this is Cooper's last episode. He wakes up in this episode. Him and Rachel are officially over. He finds out that she was lying about the pregnancy, and then he leaves Tree Hill without her really getting to final say goodbye to him or bother him more or whatever. Like, he ends up leaving and taking the blame for the crash because, it was his fault essentially, because he should have never gotten that relationship in the first place. But it's the character's last episode. We didn't ever see Cooper again. I really liked the Dan and Karen scenes in this episode. Going more into that about the crib and Dan redoing Lucas's crib for Karen to have this other baby. The kid's ghost, like I said, I think it's in Dan's head, continues to bother him throughout the first little bit of this season. Just being bothered by this ghost and harassing him. Deb is carrying the gun now herself, and she drops the gun in the cafe by accident, and it goes off and shoots the door out. This is crazy. Like, I'm shocked that they didn't have a cop come and arrest Deb at this moment. Like, you just dropped a gun, and you could have shot one of those customers in the head. Like, crazy. And so Haley goes and tells Karen, but she doesn't tell her about the gun, surprisingly. She just tells Karen that there's an issue, because when Deb goes to the cafe, she doesn't know about the gun. When Karen goes to the cafe to confront Deb about it, and then she finds out from Deb because Deb lets it slip. She's like, what happened at the door? And Haley couldn't keep her mouth shut and everything. I needed the gun for protection. And then there's this argument scene between Dan and Deb that's pretty good, real well acted between both of them, where Karen lets Deb go because it's either you need to go back to rehab or this partnership is over, and Deb takes the partnership is over. She's not going back to rehab. I like that scene too, but she bends down to get that pill, and it turns out it's just an Altoid. I thought that was good. Good writing. And Lucas talks to Whitey in this episode too about Skills joining the team. Skills wants to join the team and asks Lucas to go talk to the coach about it, and he does. That's a really hilarious scene too, with Lucas flattening Whitey's tire and essentially hard selling him into getting Skills on the team, which he ends up putting Skills on the team because of Lucas. So Skills joins the basketball team, and also the episode ends with fake Derek showing up. To the time, I guess some people thought was actually Peyton's brother. I actually think, when we'll get into this in the next episode, that it's interesting that they reveal so early on that he is fake. Not in this episode because it's the first episode we meet him, but the end of the first episode that he's in, which is 303, it ends with him realizing like something's off, like big time. But we'll talk about that in just a second. But then obviously it's Brooke's birthday, and Peyton's trying to help Lucas with their relationship and takes him to the mall where they usually steal some perfume, and in a way to repair that relationship with Brooke for both of them actually. But all that ends up happening is Brooke doesn't show up, they think, and as they're walking outside, Brooke is actually there, but they don't see her and she sees them, and it just worsens things. But the relationship's over anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Then we're moving on to 403, which is good news for people who love bad news. This episode originally aired October 11th, 2006, and was directed by John Asher and written by Mike Hero and David Strauss, who I've mentioned a lot. They write some good ones. This episode is another basketball episode of them playing. I think it's actually the first episode that they play back at their normal gym, which is actually a different gym at this point than I think they've filmed at in the past. I think they got a new location for the gym, but this is supposed to be like the actual high school again, back filming there. So Lucas joins Mouth in this episode as commentating on the game because he can't play. He gives Lucas his jersey, or gives Skills his jersey number. So Skills is now number 3, Lucas's number on the team. And it's a really funny scene too, with Skills not being put in the game. Skills going to Nathan and being like, "Hey, can you talk to Whitey? Like, somebody needs to tell him I'm not Skills because I'm good at picking splinters out of my ass." And Whitey's right behind him and hears it, and then Nathan tells Whitey again, and it's hilarious. I love that scene. So then he puts Skills in the game, and Skills does a really good job, and they win the game, which then results in a party at Rachel's house, where you continue the storyline that you started getting hints at in the last episode, that Rachel was moving on to flirting with Nathan. Cringeworthy, don't know why this was written in there. It was terrible. Didn't work for me on any level. But only reason you even have this storyline is because, well, it felt like they didn't know what to do with Rachel, first of all, as far as her character goes. But as far as like Nathan playing with this idea, he wasn't ever interested in Rachel. As an audience member, there's not going to be anything with Nathan and Rachel. But he wants answers about this car accident and who saved him, and he thinks Rachel has these answers. So that's why this goes on for as long as it does into episode 5, and that carries us into another storyline with Rachel. And it's just, there's some really good moments in season 4, and there's some good episodes in season 4. But it definitely, as I'm watching it, I definitely think this is my least favorite season of the high school years, because they start. And I don't know if this was an attempt for them to survive on CW or what it was, or if they just didn't really know what to do. But there's lots of storylines that are sort of questionable. Some I'm like, they're fine, even if they're not my favorite storylines. But there's some that's like sort of questionable, like how long the Psycho Derek thing goes along in the season. But that's not even the worst, really. They didn't really know what to do with Brooke at all in this season. Like, her storyline is garbage the whole season. Like, you have to start off here, her breaking up with Lucas, which is fine. It made sense for their characters at this point. Even which is another surprising thing. They only dated for like 4 months, from like November to March. This is all they dated. And you get the grand scheme of things here on the show, that's not very long at all. And then you look back to how long they dated in season 1 too. I think it was probably from like December. They only dated for like a month in season 1. So yeah, overall they dated for like 5 months total. Crazy. But yeah, there's that party. Everyone goes to the party. Mouse gets angry drunk in this episode, and there's like a funny scene with him and Psycho Derek when he's talking about new guys. I like that. It's always fun when you see Mouth drunk on the show, I think. But also, Lucas kind of I wouldn't say he gets drunk, but he definitely gets buzzed, which is, I like to see him buzzed too. Even you saw a little bit of that in 302 when he was dancing. I thought that was funny. There's a scene with Lucas and Brooke in this episode that mirrors that same episode 302, where he tells Brooke that he's the one for her, and she's so blown away by it. Same thing happens in this episode, but he tells her he's not the one for her, which I think was a good mirror and made sense, because I don't know, I'm really not liking how they write Brooke in this season in general. I think she's mean, and they just, I don't know. And we'll talk about more when we get to those moments in future episodes. Rachel continues to be annoying. Peyton and the fake Derek spend time together. She does think this is her brother, so she lets him all the way in and showing him her room and all this different stuff. And and he seems okay at first, other than he drives this really shitty car that for some reason he gives them a ride to school. I think that's the next episode. He gives them a ride to school, and I'm like, if I'm Lucas, I'm not ditching my Mustang to ride in this piece of shit car. But that's a whole separate thing. Brooke kisses him too to make Peyton jealous or something. I don't know. That's just back to them further not writing good stuff for Brooke. And what else here? Peyton and Nathan have a good scene at the party about Keith. And I think, if he did save Nathan, I thought that was good. Dan and Karen continue to build on their relationship, getting their friendship together there. She goes to him to ask about basketball, about losing it, and he gives her some good advice, I think, on that. And also a big thing about this one is Dan considers suicide in this episode because of that ghost that continues haunting him. He considers suicide. The ghost, which is, I think, a voice just inside Dan's head, tells him, there's one way out. And the camera pans over to the gun laying on Dan's coffee table. And I think that was good writing. I think that was what Dan's character would be thinking in this moment, was like, hey, this is probably my only way out of escaping this hell that I'm going through right now. And then one little last thing about this episode as well. Actually two things. One, Rachel and Brooke argue both about the Nathan and Haley thing, but also the fact that Rachel thinks Brooke's pregnant and that Mouth overhears, which leads us into the next episode on that. And then also Lucas goes back to the river court and plays some basketball with Skills, or throws the ball around, and talks to Skills about how Mouth said he wished they had never left the river court. But Skills is like, if we had never left the river court, none of this stuff that has happened to us would have happened. So that's a stupid way to think. But then we go into the last episode I want to talk about here today, and that's 404. Can't Stop This Thing We've Started. This episode originally aired October 18th, 2006. Was directed by Bethany Rooney. This is her final episode directing on the show, and was written by Terrence Cawley. So the big thing about this episode is Karen and Whitey want Lucas to rejoin the basketball team. He'll have to continue taking his medication, and he can only play for 15 minutes a night, but he will be able to play. And this is also because Karen realizes how important basketball is to Lucas, and after her conversation with Dan. Now, Lucas doesn't want to join the team at first because he thinks, having it back halfway is worse than not having it at all. Dan ends up having a conversation with Lucas that I think speaks to him a little bit. I like that. I like seeing these scenes with Dan and Karen and Lucas throughout this season, and you really get a bittersweet of what it could have been if this had worked out for Dan. If this, not necessarily in season 4, but in general, if he had been a different person, what we would have gotten from those relationships, which is also makes it more hard to digest at the end of the season, everything that happens. But so we have all that. Lucas is on to Derek being weird in this episode. It starts with them getting dropped off at school and him noticing Derek taking a picture of Peyton's ass, and then from on that, him noticing him smelling Peyton's hair. Further, and from that, we also have the stuff at the Trick when they have the concert with Derek making up the lie about Lucas cutting Peyton from his life if Brooke would take him back, and all that. And I really liked that they made Lucas own Derek, and they followed through with that stuff. I liked it. One thing I want to mention before I forget about that, well, a couple things here. Nathan also sold the car for a motorcycle, which was a dumb decision, but not like terribly written. But he does that. He crashes in this episode too, and they won't take the bike back because he crashed and was beat up. That happens. But also, yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is I don't really know. I think they filmed this on the UNCW campus towards the beginning, like the administration office or something. But they filmed the high school, the outside shots of the high school. They filmed at a different location. Not the whole season, because I know there's shots later in the season. They go back and they film it at Cape Fear Community College, and there's still shots that we've already seen in this season at Cape Fear Community College. But there are certain shots in the parking lot that are definitely not Cape Fear Community College. So I don't know where it's at. Like, there's lots of trees in the parking lot, and there's not that many trees at Cape Fear because it's downtown. So I'm not really sure. Like the scene where Nathan pulls up on the bike and you know that he sold the car, like that. A lot of the scenes where they're just parking, and when Derek drops them off, all of that is at a different location. But we know they go back there in the next episode to Cape Fear Community College, because the scene with Derek standing on the bridge and watching them, which is in the next episode 4 or 5, that's back at Cape Fear. So one of the things they introduced in this episode, and I had forgotten about, honestly, because I just blocked it out before I started rewatching this season, is that they do the Clean Teen storyline in this season, which is cringeworthy, awful. Don't know why anyone decided to write this into the show. Shelley's character sucks anyways. It just does. It's not very good. She's introduced in this episode, and it's all about trying to prevent Brooke from getting an abortion, which she's not even pregnant. It was just bad. Didn't like that. And obviously the Shelley character continues throughout this season, as well as the Clean Teen storyline that introduces Chase and everything, and it's all pretty bad, and that's why, like, that brings season 4 down for me definitely a little bit, and it's probably going to make it my least favorite season of the high school years, because it is such a big part moving forward in this season. What else here? Peyton wants to tell Lucas about her feelings. She plans to do that in the episode before the rumor spreads that Brooke is pregnant, and Lucas has to go talk to her about that. Deb fires Karen in this episode from Trick, because we find out too that we really didn't know like the specifics about this, but so Karen and Deb's Karen we knew was the main owner of Karen's Cafe, but we knew that she had a partnership with Deb. That was never on paper as far as the cafe goes, but as far as Trick goes, and this makes sense money wise, Deb is the majority owner of Trick, not Karen. So she fires Karen. Another big thing is Dan's talking to a therapist in this episode, and I really like that. It's the same therapist that shows up at the intervention at the beginning of this episode with Deb, with Nathan, Haley, Karen, and Dan that show up to this, and then Deb walks out. But which I also think a funny thing about that is Haley did not know a couple things. She didn't know that Deb ever slept with Keith. This was the first time she found out about that, and it's also the first time she finds out that Deb tried to kill Dan. She finds about both of these scenes, and you see Haley's reaction, just like, and I love that. I love that they put that in there, because he didn't really think about it. Like the character wouldn't know that until this moment, especially the first thing. But that happens. But then Dan goes to see that same therapist and talks to her, and you see more into his backstory and some things that I really like about the fact that he drove all night the night Lucas was born, and then found Keith holding Lucas, and then never went into the room. I think that was a great story, and it adds a lot to that character, and something that stays with me when I think about the character overall, that his character did that. And another thing I want to add to is the whole, people think that Brooke is pregnant, and Lucas and Brooke have an argument about it and all this, and she makes the point, and she's like, it's not like you're the only guy I ever slept with, because she says that because he said that to her in season 1 when they had the first pregnancy scare. So then he makes the suggestion, Chris Keller, because that was the guy she had slept with before Lucas. Lucas doesn't know how long it takes to get pregnant. This is unfortunate. A little scary thing about Lucas's character. Tree Hill High has felt them. But he definitely does not know how long it takes to get pregnant, because she would have slept with Chris Keller in November, and this is March. So if she got pregnant with Chris Keller's baby, she's been pregnant for a while. So that's interesting. But yeah, the episode ends. The last episode 303 ended, like I said, with Derek and like revealing how he wasn't who he said he was, or at least was a creepo. Even if he did, was all the pictures of Peyton on the wall. They further do that in this episode, where it ends with him picking up a prostitute and dressing her up like Peyton. And then revealing that he got that tattoo on his back too, of Peyton's artwork, which is crazy, for a lot of different reasons. Like, you just went out and got that, you were able to book that tattoo so soon and get that work done. I don't know, that's crazy. But anyways, and like your back would have been sore, I don't know. Anyways, but he got that big tattoo on his back, and the episode ends with that, setting us up for a big confrontation with Derek in the next episode 405. But we'll talk about that on the next video. Thanks you guys for tuning in, checking the video out here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and go back and check out these other One Tree Hill rewatches if you haven't already, and definitely check out the tour of Wilmington that I did as well. Once I finish season 4, I'm going to have a couple more other special videos for One Tree Hill, not just the rewatch coming out, like ranking episodes, seasons, talking about my favorite characters of the high school years. And then we'll get into season 5 eventually, where we do that time jump and everything. A lot of things are going to be changing. Also, if you like film, if you came across this video first, go and check out my other stuff. I have stuff weekly. Usually it's me, my friend Ethan, and my friend Abel. And we talk about different things. On Mondays, we have our What If show. Tuesdays, we have our Top Shelf, where we take something and do rankings. Wednesdays, On the Rocks, where we take a topic unfiltered about film usually, and to see where it goes. Thursdays, we take a particular film. We've been doing DCEU films, but we're going to start doing other films as well, breaking them down, doing like reviews, dissecting them. And then on Fridays, we have Happy Hour, which is our weekly movie news show. So go check that out, guys, and I will see you guys next time.